How can some animals communicate via electric fields?
Sharks, skates, and rays, all cartilaginous fish, have specialized structures for sensing weak electric fields. These structures are used for finding prey and navigation, and are also thought to be useful in finding mates as well.
What is the relationship between telomeres and cancer?
Increased telomerase activity can increase longevity of cells, but it is also implicated in cancer formation. Almost 90% of cancer cells have been found to have enhanced telomerase activity. And a cancer cell usually divides about 80 times before a tumor mass becomes large enough to be detected. In contrast, normal human cells usually divide 30 to 50 times before telomeres become too short and doubling stops.
What does it mean when a lake is brown or blue?
When a lake is brown, it usually indicates that eutrophication is occurring. This process refers to premature aging of a lake, when nutrients are added to the water. Usually due to runoff, which may be either agricultural or industrial in origin. Due to this rich supply of nutrients, blue-green algae begin to take over the green algae in the lake. And food webs within the lake are disturbed, leading to an eventual loss of fish. When a lake is blue, this usually means that the lake has been damaged by acid precipitation. The gradual drop in pH caused by exposure to acid rain causes disruption of the food webs, eventually killing most organisms. The end result is clear water, which reflects the low productivity of the lake.
What is the homunculus theory?
Illustrations from the late 17th century depict sperm containing a miniaturized adult. This preformed human was called a homunculus. It was thought at that time that the sperm, and its homunculus, contained all of the traits for building a baby and that the egg and womb served simply as incubators.
Who is considered the founder of physiology?
As an experimenter, Claude Bernard, 1813 to 1878. Enriched physiology by introducing numerous new concepts into the field. The most famous of these concepts is that of the French milieu intérieur or internal environment. The complex functions of the various organs are closely interrelated and are all directed to maintaining the constancy of internal conditions despite external changes. All cells exist in this aqueous, blood and lymph, internal environment. which bathes the cells and provides a medium for the simple exchange of nutrients and waste material.
How is the vertebrate brain organized?
The vertebrate brain is divided into three regions: the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. The size of each region of the brain varies from species to species. The hindbrain may be considered an extension of the spinal cord. Hence, it is often described as the most primitive portion of the brain. The primary function of the hindbrain is to coordinate motor reflexes. The midbrain is responsible for processing visual information. The forebrain is the center for processing sensory information in fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals.
What is the most common blood cell?
Red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes, are the most common blood cells. A milliliter, ml, of blood contains approximately 5 billion red blood cells. The average person has a total of 25 trillion red blood cells in their bloodstream. Red blood cells are very small. It would take a string of 2,000 red blood cells to circle a pencil.
What is a gene family?
Genes are organized into groups called gene families. Many genes have overlapping sequences with each other. Those that share between 30 and 90% of their sequences are grouped together in families. Gene families may range in size from just a few genes to several thousand. An example of a gene family is the group of genes that code for hist-1s. Hist-1s are proteins important for maintaining DNA in a particular shape.
What is unique about the marine iguanas of the Galapagos?
The marine iguanas of the Galapagos show evidence of unique behavioral adaptations to their environment. They are strictly vegetarian and are able to swim. In effect, they are the cows of the Galapagos, taking on the role of primary consumers.
What is biopreservation?
Biopreservation refers to the preservation and enhanced safety of food using biological materials. An example of this is niacin, a bacterial protein that can act as a broad-spectrum antibiotic. Niacin cannot be synthesized chemically. So the niacin-producing bacteria Lactobacillus must be used to generate the protein.
What is unusual about the stinkhorn fungus Dictyophora?
The stinkhorn fungus Dictyophora indusiata is one of the world's fastest growing organisms. It pushes out of the ground at a rate of about 0.2 in, 0.5 centimeters, per minute. The growth rate is so fast that a crackling sound can be heard as the tissues of the fungus swell and stretch. During growth, a delicate, net-like veil forms around the fungus, giving this fungus its common name, the Lady of the Veil. The fungus then decomposes and in the process produces a strong odor that is similar to the smell of decaying flesh. This odor attracts flies that crawl over the fungus and collect its spores on their feet. This process ensures that the spores are carried to new areas. Although the odor produced by species of Dictyophora is quite unpleasant, members of this genus are considered delicacies in China, where they are marketed as aphrodisiacs.
What is Lamarckian evolution?
The French biologist Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, 1744–1829, is credited as the first person to propose a theory that attempts to explain how and why evolutionary change occurs in living organisms. The mechanism Lamarck proposed is known as the inheritance of acquired characteristics, meaning that what individuals experience during their lifetime will be passed along to their offspring as genetic traits. This is sometimes referred to as the theory of use and disuse. A classic example of this would be the giraffe's neck. Lamarckian evolution would predict that as giraffes stretch their necks to reach higher branches on trees, their necks grow longer. As a result, this increase in neck length will be transmitted to egg and sperm such that the offspring of giraffes whose necks have grown will also have long necks. While Lamarck's idea was analytically based on available data, giraffes have long necks and give birth to offspring with long necks as well. He did not know that. In general, environmental factors do not change genetic sequences in such a direct fashion.
What are aerial roots?
Aerial roots are adventitious roots formed on above-ground structures such as stems. Aerial roots serve different functions in different species. In some species, such as the banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis, and red mangrove, Rhizophora mangle, the aerial roots are called prop roots since they support the plant. The aerial roots of ivy, Heterohelix, ball moss, Tillandsia recurvata, and Spanish moss, Tillandsia usneoides, cling to the surface of an object providing support for the stem. The aerial roots of the vanilla orchid, Vanilla planifolia, and philodendron are photosynthetic.
What factors have contributed to an increase in the number of resistant bacteria?
Bacteria mutate in order to adapt to new conditions. A mutation that enables a microbe to survive in the presence of an antibiotic quickly spreads throughout a microbial population. Since bacteria replicate very rapidly, a mutation can swiftly become prevalent. The overuse of antibiotics promotes the emergence of resistant bacteria. Antibiotics may also be prescribed for viral infections that they are not effective against. Furthermore, patients often fail to follow the directions for taking antibiotics precisely. A prescribed dose of antibiotics should be taken until it is completed. Although an individual can feel better shortly after starting a treatment, not completing the full course of antibiotics often destroys only the most vulnerable bacteria. Relatively resistant bacteria are able to survive and prosper in a human's body. Because antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria do not respond to standard treatments, illnesses are able to last for longer periods of time and can result in death. The proliferation of resistant bacteria has made it more difficult to establish effective treatments.
What are the largest and smallest aerial spider webs?
The largest aerial webs are spun by the tropical orb weavers of the genus Nephila, which produce webs that measure up to 18.9 feet 6 meters in circumference. The smallest webs are produced by the species Glyphosis cottoni. Their webs cover an area of about 0.75 sq in, 4.84 sq/cm.
What are some commercial uses of red algae?
The cell walls of red algae contain a mucilaginous outer component usually composed of agar and carrageenan. Agar is used for making gel capsules, a material that is used to make dental impressions and as a base for cosmetics. It is also the basis of the scientific laboratory media used for growing bacteria, fungi, and other organisms. Agar is also used to prevent baked goods from drying out and for rapid setting jellies. Carrageenan is used as a stabilizer for emulsions such as paints, cosmetics, ice cream, and many dairy products. The genus Porphyra, commonly called nori, is cultivated as a food and is specifically popular in Japan.
What are the main components of the nucleus?
The boundary around the nucleus consists of two membranes, an inner one and an outer one, that form the nuclear envelope. Nuclear pores are small openings in the nuclear envelope that permit molecules to move between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. The nucleolus is a prominent structure within the nucleus. The nucleoplasm is the interior space of the nucleus. In addition, the DNA-bearing chromosomes of the cell are found in the nucleus. The nucleus is the repository for the cell's genetic information, and the control center for the expression of that information.
Can genetic engineering be used to save endangered species?
As endangered species disappear from natural habitats and are only found in zoos, researchers are looking for ways to conserve these species. Using cryopreservation, the Zoological Society of San Diego has created a frozen zoo that stores viable cell lines from more than 3,200 individual mammals, birds, and reptiles, representing 355 species and subspecies. Researchers maintain that there should still be continued efforts to preserve species in their natural habitats. But by preserving and studying animal DNA, scientists can learn genetic aspects crucial to the species' survival.
If primates are so close to humans, both genetically and evolutionarily, then why can't they speak?
Scientists used to think that apes were not intelligent enough to speak. However, it is now thought that an ape's vocal cords are not built for speech. After many years of observations, it is well known that apes do use vocal communication. But it is usually in the form of hoots and grunts, with accompanying gestures.
Where did viruses originate?
The most widely accepted hypothesis is that viruses are bits of nucleic acid that escaped from cells. According to this view, some viruses trace their origin to animal cells, some to plant cells, and others to bacterial cells. The variety of origins may explain why viruses are species-specific, that is, why some viruses only infect species that they are closely related to, or the organisms from which they originated. This hypothesis is supported by the genetic similarity between a virus and its host cell.
Do all starfishes, or sea stars, have 5 arms?
Starfishes, or sea stars, are members of the class Asteroidea. Their bodies consist of a central disk from which radiate from 5 to more than 20 arms or rays.
What is a MVP?
The MVP, minimum viable population size, is the smallest number of individuals needed to perpetuate a population, subpopulation, or species. PVAs, population viability analyses, are especially helpful in predicting the MVP.
What are the structures present in typical fungi?
Most fungi are a mass of intertwined filaments known as hyphae that are surrounded by a rigid cell wall. Each hypha cell has a distinct nucleus. Individual cells may be separated by walls called septa. The hyphae form a radially expanding network called the mycelium. Cytoplasm flows freely throughout hyphae, passing through major pores present in the septa. Because of this streaming, proteins synthesized throughout the hyphae may be carried to their tips, which are actively growing. As a result, fungal hyphae may grow very rapidly when food and water are abundant and the temperature is optimum.
What sources do muscle cells use for energy?
Muscle cells use a variety of energy sources to power their contractions. For quick energy, the cells utilize their stores of ATP and creatine phosphate, which is another phosphate-containing compound. These stored molecules are usually depleted within the first 20 seconds of activity. The cells then switch to other sources, most notably glycogen, a carbohydrate that is made of glucose molecules strung together in long branching chains.
What is the difference between a food chain and a food web?
A food chain refers to transfer of energy from producers through herbivores through carnivores in a community. An example of a food chain would be little fishes eating plankton, and those little fishes in turn being eaten by bigger fishes. The term food web is broader, as it includes interconnected food chains within a specific ecosystem. Perhaps the bigger fishes eat the plankton as well. A food web describes a nutritional portrait of the ecosystem. In 1927, Charles Elton, 1868 to 1945, was one of the first scientists to diagram a food web. In his case, a description of feeding relationships on Bear Island in the Arctic.
Who was the first person to receive gene therapy?
In 1990, Ashanti De Silva, a 4-year-old with severe combined immune deficiency, SCID, had her white blood cells removed and replaced with a normal copy of the defective gene. SCID is a life-threatening disease in which patients lack a healthy immune system due to the inability to produce an important enzyme, adenosine deaminase. Although the treatment proved safe and her immune system was strengthened, the treated cells failed to give rise to additional healthy cells. In order to maintain normal levels of adenosine deaminase, De Silva must take doses of the enzyme itself.
What is a microarray?
A microarray is a technique in which PCR-amplified DNA fragments are placed on a thin glass or silicon plate by cross-linking the DNA to the glass or silicon. Fluorescent dye labeled mRNA or complementary DNA is then hybridized to the sample. When hybridization occurs, a specific fluorescent color is produced. For example, if two samples, one labeled with a red dye and one with a green dye, are both hybridized to the same DNA sequence on the microarray, a yellow color is produced. The amount of color produced also allows scientists to detect the level of gene expression. Mitosis, a fundamental process in cloning and cell regeneration, involves cell nucleus division in which each chromosome splits into two, such that both daughter cells have identical chromosomal makeup.
What is a malignant cell?
Cancerous cells that reproduce quickly and expand beyond the tissue or organ where they originated are described as malignant. Malignant tumors are more difficult to eradicate because they may colonize organs far removed from their origin. For example, cancers that originate in the lung can quickly spread to the brain and other organs through the circulatory system.
What are cell junctions?
Cell junctions are the specialized connections between the plasma membranes of adjoining cells. The three general types of cell junctions are tight junctions, anchoring junctions, and communicating junctions. Tight junctions bind cells together, forming a barrier that is leak-proof. For example, tight junctions form the lining of the digestive tract, preventing the contents of the intestine from entering the body. Anchoring, or adhering, junctions link cells together, enabling them to function as a unit and forming tissue, such as heart muscle or the epithelium that comprises skin. Communicating, or gap, junctions allow rapid chemical and electrical communication between cells. They consist of channels that connect the cytoplasm of adjacent cells.
Is antibiotic resistance an evolutionary trend?
Antibiotic resistance is the loss of susceptibility in bacteria to drugs like penicillin and erythromycin. The reason that it is interesting from an evolutionary perspective is that it demonstrates evolution happening in real time, that is, within a period easily observable by humans. The variation in response to antibiotics within a population of bacteria is similar to that described by Darwin and Wallace. When some bacterial cells survive after an incomplete course of antibiotic treatment, they form the basis for a new drug-resistant strain. What is troubling, however, is that different types of bacteria can actually share the genes that make them drug-resistant. so that this ability is becoming more prevalent among different strains of disease-causing organisms.
What is proteomics?
Proteomics is the study of proteins encoded by a genome. This field extends the Human Genome Project and is a far more complex study than finding where genes are located on chromosomes. Proteins are dynamic molecules that can change according to the needs of a cell. And complete understanding of cell metabolism requires that scientists understand all of the proteins involved as well as their genes.
Why is light important for living organisms?
Virtually all life depends on the availability of light, which powers photosynthesis, the process of synthesizing energy. Light travels in waves, and its energy is contained in packets called photons. The energy of a photon is inversely proportional to the wavelength of the light. The longer the wavelength, the less energy per photon. Sunlight consists of a spectrum of colors present in light.
What is the most popular state insect?
The honeybee is by far the most popular state insect, having been selected by 16 states: Arkansas, California, nicknamed the Beehive State, Georgia, Kansas, Louisiana, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, New Jersey, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Vermont, and Wisconsin.
What products are made from recycling plastic?
A new clothing fiber called Fortril EcoSpun is made from recycled plastic soda bottles. The fiber is knit or woven into garments such as fleece for outerwear or long underwear. The processor estimates that every pound of Fortril EcoSpun fiber results in 10 plastic bottles being kept out of landfills.
What is the nervous system?
The nervous system is an intricately organized, interconnected system of nerve cells that relays messages to and from the brain and spinal cord of an organism in vertebrates. It receives sensory input, processes the input, and then sends messages to the tissues and organs for an appropriate response. In vertebrates there are two parts to the nervous system: 1, the central nervous system, consisting of the brain and spinal cord, and 2, the peripheral system, consisting of nerves that carry signals to and from the central nervous system.
Which cell structures are unique to plant cells?
the chloroplast, central vacuole, tonoplast, cell wall, and plasmodesmata are only found to occur in plant cells.
What happens in a cell if mitochondria are defective?
Since mitochondria are the energy producers of a cell, if a cell's mitochondria are defective, any cells that have a high metabolic rate will also be affected. There are metabolic poisons that affect specific aspects of mitochondrial function. These include cyanide, dinitrophenol, an ingredient of early diet drugs, valinomycin, and gramicidin. If mitochondria are damaged, they begin to leak free radicals that can alter DNA. Because mitochondria have their own DNA, it is also possible for them to be altered by genetic mutations. Mutations in mitochondrial genes are thought to play a role in degenerative neurological diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
What is the structure of stems of seed plants?
There are three basic types of organization in the primary structure of stems. 1. The vascular system may appear as a continuous hollow cylinder around the pith. 2. Discrete vascular bundles may form a single ring around the pith. Or 3. The vascular bundles may appear scattered throughout the ground tissue.
Whose experiments showed that non-lethal bacteria could be transformed into lethal bacteria?
In 1928, an Army medical officer, Frederick Griffith, 1878 to 1939, was trying to find a vaccine against Streptococcus pneumoniae. In the course of his work, he found that there were two strains of the bacteria, one that had a smooth coat S but was lethal. The other form had a rough coat R, which was non-lethal when injected into mice. He decided to investigate what would happen if he injected both heat-killed S bacteria and live R bacteria into mice. To his surprise, the mice injected with this combination died. Upon closer examination of the blood, living S bacteria were found. Something had occurred that transformed the non-lethal R bacteria into S bacteria. Subsequent experiments throughout the 1940s attempted to find the identity of the transforming factor, which was eventually found to be DNA.
What are the differences between the 15 major phyla of protists?
The great diversity among the protists has made their grouping and classification difficult. Characteristics used to classify protists include mode of locomotion, presence or absence of flagella and cilia, body form and coverings, pigmentation, and the ability to conduct photosynthesis. Mode of nutrition, and whether the organism is unicellular or multicellular.
What is the ELISA test?
ELISA stands for Enzyme-Linked Immunosorbent Assay. It is a test used to determine if an individual has generated antibodies for a certain pathogen. In the test, inactivated antigens, for the pathogen, are coded onto a plate. In addition to antibodies from the patient's serum, there is a second anti-human antibody linked to an enzyme. If the patient's antibodies bind to both the second antibody and the antigen, a color change occurs.
What important organelle is found in the mesophyll layer of the leaf?
The mesophyll, from the Greek terms mesos, meaning middle, and phylum, meaning leaf. Of a leaf consists of masses of parenchyma cells that are packed with chloroplasts important for photosynthesis. The palisade parenchyma comprises columnar layers of parenchyma cells found beneath the epidermis of many leaves. The spongy parenchyma is a mass of cells that are irregular in shape and often highly branched. There are large intercellular spaces in the spongy parenchyma that function in gas exchange and the passage of water vapor from the leaves. These spaces are connected to the stomata.
What are lichens?
Lichens are organisms that grow on rocks, tree branches, and bare ground. They are composed of two different entities living together in a symbiotic relationship. 1. A population of either algal or cyanobacterial cells that are single or filamentous. And 2. Fungi. Lichens do not have roots, stems, flowers, or leaves. The fungal component of a lichen is called the mycobiont, from the Greek terms mykes, which means fungus, and bios, meaning life, and the photosynthetic component is called the photobiont, from the Greek terms photo, meaning light, and bios, meaning life. The scientific name given to the lichen is the name of the fungus and is most often an ascomycete. As the fungus has no chlorophyll, it cannot manufacture its own food, but it can absorb food from algae. Lichens and algae enjoy a symbiotic relationship. Lichens can often be found growing around and on top of algae, providing the algae with protection from the sun, thus decreasing the loss of moisture. Fungi and algae were the first organisms recognized as having a symbiotic relationship. A unique feature of this relationship is that it is so perfectly developed and balanced that the two organisms behave as a single organism.
How do muscle cells work?
Muscle cells, whether the skeletal muscles in the arms or legs, the smooth muscles that line the digestive tract and other organs, or the cardiac muscle cells in the heart, work by contracting Skeletal muscle cells are comprised of thousands of contracting units known as sarcomeres. The proteins actin, thin filament, and myosin, thick filament, are the major components of the sarcomere. These units perform work by moving structures closer together through space. Sarcomeres in the skeletal muscles pull parts of the body through space relative to each other. Example: walking or swinging your arms. To visualize how a sarcomere works, interlace the fingers of your two hands with the palms facing toward you, represents actin, myosin. Push the fingers together so that the overall length from one thumb to the other is decreased, sarcomere length decreases.
Why do enzymes only work in specific environments?
Because changes in temperature and pH can cause the structure of a protein to change. Every enzyme has criteria that must be met in order for it to perform its function. For example, the amylase that is active in the mouth cannot function in the acidic environment of the stomach. Pepsin, which breaks down proteins in the stomach, cannot function in the mouth.
How many Nobel Prizes have been awarded in genetics?
Of the 162 Nobel Prizes awarded in the category for physiology or medicine, 42 prizes, 26%, have been awarded in genetics. This far exceeds other categories. The closest in number is disease treatment, with 24 prizes, 15%.
How numerous are roundworms?
Roundworms, or nematodes, are members of the phylum Nematoda, from the Greek term nematos, meaning thread, and are numerous in two respects. 1. Number of known and potential species, and 2. The total number of these organisms in a habitat. Approximately 12,000 species of nematodes have been named, but it has been estimated that if all species were known, the number would be closer to 500. 000 nematodes live in a variety of habitats ranging from the sea to soil. 6 cubic inches, 100 cubic centimeters, of soil may contain several thousand nematodes. A square yard, 0.85 square meter, of woodland or agricultural soil may contain several million of them. Good topsoil may contain billions of nematodes per acre.
How can the results of a genetic cross be predicted?
The results of a genetic cross can be predicted using a diagram called a Punnett square, which graphically represents Mendel's laws of segregation and independent assortment. On each side of the square, one places the possible alleles donated by each parent. Dominant alleles are represented by capital letters G in this case, and recessive alleles by lowercase letters, g. Inside the boxes are the allelic combinations, in this case. Each box would contain GG, heterozygous combination.
What mushroom has been identified as a fossil?
Mushrooms are rarely found in fossil records since there is little in the structure of a mushroom that can be fossilized. In 1992, researchers in the Dominican Republic discovered a fossil of a fleshy, gilled mushroom. The mushroom, Copronytes dominicana, is believed to be 35 million to 40 million years old and is the only known fossil mushroom from the tropics. Microscopic examination suggests it is related to modern-day inky cap mushrooms.
Who was Charles Darwin?
The theory of natural selection proposed by Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, revolutionized all aspects of natural science. Darwin was born into a family of physicians and planned to follow his father and grandfather in that profession. Unable to stand the sight of blood, he studied divinity at Cambridge and received a degree from the university in 1830.
Where is epithelial tissue found?
Epithelial tissue, also called epithelium, from the Greek ep, meaning on, and the li, meaning nipple, covers every surface, both external and internal, of the body. The outer layer of the skin, the epidermis, is one example of epithelial tissue. Other examples of epithelial tissue are the lining of the lungs, kidney tubules, and the inner surfaces of the digestive system, including the esophagus, stomach, and intestines. Epithelial tissue also includes the lining of parts of the respiratory system.
Can an organism have more than two sets of genes?
Having more than two complete sets of chromosomes is known as polyploidy. In humans, it is virtually impossible to survive to adulthood as a polyploid. However, plants can often survive and even thrive as polyploids. In fact, this is a common method by which new plant species arise.
What are the most common tapeworm infections in humans?
Tapeworms, members of the class Cestida, have long, flat bodies in which there is a linear series of sets of reproductive organs. Each set or segment is called a proglottid.
What are the special challenges of producing effective antifungal drugs?
Since fungi are eukaryotic, their cellular structure is similar to, if not the same as, that of animals and humans. Drugs that affect metabolic pathways in fungi often affect corresponding pathways in host cells, which can result in the host sustaining drug toxicity. Many antifungal drugs can only be used topically. Very few drugs have been found to be selectively toxic, that is, toxic to fungi and not their human hosts.
Who first proposed the kingdom Protista?
The German zoologist Ernst Haeckel, 1834–1919, first proposed the kingdom Protista in 1866. For the newly discovered organisms that were neither plant nor animal. The term protist is derived from the Greek term protistos, meaning the very first.
How did cells evolve?
The central criteria for living cells are a membrane capable of separating the inside of the cell from its surroundings, genetic material capable of being reproduced, and the ability to acquire and use energy, metabolism. The Miller-Urey experiment demonstrated that organic molecules, including genetic material, could arise abiotically. Phospholipids, the molecules that comprise all cellular membranes, can spontaneously form spheres when exposed to water. Although no one knows exactly how living cells evolved, these data demonstrate how a part of the scenario may have unfolded.
What is an isotope?
Atoms of an element that have different numbers of neutrons are isotopes of the same element. Isotopes of an element have the same atomic number but different mass numbers. Common examples are the isotopes of carbon, 12C and 14C. 12C has 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons, while 14C has 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 8 neutrons. Some isotopes are physically stable, while others, known as radioisotopes, are unstable. Radioisotopes undergo radioactive decay, emitting both particles and energy. If the decay leads to a change in the number of protons, the atomic number changes, transforming the isotopes into a different element.
What are the specialized cells in plants?
All plant cells have several common features, such as chloroplasts, a cell wall, and a large vacuole. In addition, a number of specialized cells are found only in vascular plants. They include parenchyma cells, parenchyma, from the Greek para, meaning beside, and enchine, meaning to pour in. Cells are the most common cells found in leaves, stems, and roots. They are often spherical in shape with only primary cell walls. Parenchyma cells play a role in food storage, photosynthesis, and aerobic respiration. They are living cells at maturity. Most nutrients in plants, such as corn and potatoes, are contained in starch-laden parenchyma cells. These cells comprise the photosynthetic tissue of a leaf, the flesh of fruit, and the storage tissue of roots and seeds. Collenchyma cells, collenchyma, from the Greek term kolla, meaning glue. Cells have thickened primary cell walls and lack secondary cell walls. They form strands or continuous cylinders just below the surfaces of stems or leaf stalks. The most common function of collenchyma cells is to provide support for parts of the plant that are still growing, such as the stem. Similar to parenchyma cells, collenchyma cells are living cells at maturity. Sclerenchyma cells, sclerenchyma, from the Greek term skleros, meaning hard. Cells have tough, rigid, thick secondary cell walls. These secondary cell walls are hardened with lignin, which is the main chemical component of wood. It makes the cell walls more rigid. Sclerenchyma cells provide rigid support for the plant. There are two types of sclerenchyma cells, fiber and scleroid. Fiber cells are long, slender cells that usually form strands or bundles. Scleroid cells, sometimes called stone cells, occur singly or in groups and have various forms. They have a thick, very hard secondary cell wall. Most sclerenchyma cells are dead cells at maturity. Xylem, xylem, from the Greek term xylos, meaning wood, is the main water-conducting tissue of plants and consists of dead, hollow, tubular cells arranged end to end. The water transported in xylem replaces that lost via evaporation through stomata. The two types of water-conducting cells are tracheids and vessel elements. Water flows from the roots of a plant up through the shoot via pits in the secondary walls of the tracheids. Vessel elements have perforations in their end walls to allow the water to flow between cells. Phloem, the two kinds of cells in the food-conducting tissue of plants, the phloem, from the Greek term phloios, meaning bark, are sieve cells and sieve tube members. Sieve cells are found in seedless vascular plants and gymnosperms, while sieve tube members are found in angiosperms. Both types of cells are elongated, slender, tube-like cells arranged end to end with clusters of pores at each cell junction. Sugars, especially sucrose, other compounds, and some mineral ions move between adjacent food-conducting cells. Sieve tube members have thin primary cell walls but lack secondary cell walls. They are living cells at maturity. Epidermis, several types of specialized Cells occur in the epidermis including guard cells, trichomes, and root hairs. Flattened epidermal cells, one layer thick and coated by a thick layer of cuticle. Cover all parts of the primary plant body.
What is the economic importance of roots?
Carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, horseradish, sugar beets, and sweet potatoes are all taproots that have been used as food for human consumption for centuries. The spices licorice, sassafras, and sarsaparilla. The flavoring used to make root beer, are derived from roots. The drugs aconite, gentian, ipecac, ginseng, reserpine, a tranquilizer, and protoveratrine, a heart relaxant, are all extracted from the roots of plants.
What animals have been studied for play behavior?
Coyotes, wolves, and dogs, all canids, have been studied extensively for comparisons of play behavior patterns. Neither dogs, specifically beagles, nor wolves showed agonistic behavior during play. In comparison, coyotes showed high levels of agonistic behavior throughout a comparable developmental period. Coyotes usually established dominance in a pack by fighting at an early age. How is BF?
How many vertebrae are in the neck of a giraffe?
A giraffe neck has 7 vertebrae, the same as other mammals, but the vertebrae are greatly elongated.
How are ribosomes different from other organelles?
Ribosomes differ from most other organelles in not being bound by a membrane.
What are the essential nutrient elements required for plant growth?
Essential nutrients are chemical elements that are necessary for plant growth. An element is essential for plant growth when, 1. It is required for a plant to complete its life cycle. To produce viable seeds, 2. It is part of a molecule or component of the plant that is itself essential to the plant, such as the magnesium in the chlorophyll molecule. And 3. The plant displays symptoms of deficiency in the absence of the element. Essential nutrients are also referred to as essential minerals and essential inorganic nutrients.
What is a petri dish, and who developed it?
A petri dish is a shallow dish consisting of 2 round, overlapping halves. The petri dish is used to grow bacteria and other microorganisms on a solid culture medium, usually nutrient agar. The top of the dish is larger than the bottom so that when the dish is closed, a strong seal is created, preventing contamination of the culture. This device was developed in 1887 by Julius Richard Petrie, 1852 to 1921. A member of Robert Koch's laboratory. Petri dishes are very easy to use, can be stacked on each other to save space, and are one of the most common items in a microbiology laboratory.
What is the most primitive group of animals?
Sponges, phylum Porifera, from the Latin terms porus, meaning pore, and fera, meaning bearing, represent the most primitive animals. These organisms are aggregates of specialized cells without true tissues or organs, with little differentiation and integration, and with no body symmetry. A sponge's body is perforated by holes that lead to an inner water chamber. Sponges pump water through those pores and expel it through a large opening at the top of the chamber. While water is passing through the body, nutrients are engulfed. Oxygen is absorbed, and waste is eliminated. Sponges are distinctive in possessing choanocytes, special flagellated cells whose beating drives water through the body cavity and that characterize them as suspension feeders, also known as filter feeders.
What is a chromosome?
A chromosome is the thread-like part of a cell that contains DNA and carries the genetic material of a cell. In prokaryotic cells, chromosomes consist entirely of DNA and are not enclosed in a nuclear membrane. In eukaryotic cells, the chromosomes are found within the nucleus and contain both DNA and RNA.
How can animal thought processes be studied?
Determining how an animal thinks will involve scanning the brain of the animal while performing a cognitive task. Data would then be compared with humans. Although human functional MRI experiments are becoming common, such experiments on other animals are still quite rare.
Who is known as the founder of botany?
The ancient Greek scientist Theophrastus, ca. 372 ca. 287 BCE, is known as the father of botany. His two works on botany, on the history of plants and on the causes of plants, were so comprehensive that 800 years passed before any new significant botanical information that had not been covered by Theophrastus was discovered. He integrated the practice of agriculture into botany and established Theories regarding plant growth and the analysis of plant structure. He related plants to their natural environment and identified, classified, and described 550 different plants.
What is the Gaia hypothesis?
The Gaia hypothesis, named for Gaia, the earth goddess of ancient Greece, is a controversial idea that the world is a single living organism that is capable of self-maintenance and regulation. It was first proposed by James Lovelock, 1919, and Lynn Margulis, 1938. In 1974, many scientists regard it as a useful analogy but a difficult theory to test scientifically.
What are some of the tests scientists use to identify major types of organic compounds in living organisms?
Scientists use different tests to detect the presence of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Commonly used tests include the Benedict's test for reducing sugars, the iodine test for starch, the Biuret test for proteins, the Sudan 4 test and the grease spot test for lipids, and the disc diphenylamine test for nucleic acids.
Why are there so many flies in the summer?
Another way to ask this question would be, what is an opportunistic species? Species have evolved two general strategies for success in life. Either they specialize in adaptations that allow them to survive the boom and bust cycles within the environment, or they concentrate their efforts in taking advantage of short-term opportunities to succeed. Species utilizing these two strategies have various names including opportunist and equilibrium species. Opportunists move into newly opened habitats, for example, as dandelions overwhelm spring lawns, and reproduce rapidly with abandon. Other common examples of opportunistic species include insect species, like mosquitoes and flies that save their reproductive efforts to exploit advantageous changes in their habitat like a hard rain or fresh roadkill. When conditions are just right, these species go full tilt from mere existence to population explosion, which explains why fly populations boom so suddenly in the summer.
Why are islands a good place to study evolution?
Island populations tend to be reproductively isolated from the mainland. Therefore, they are more likely to demonstrate adaptations that are particular to that island's ecology. This provides researchers an opportunity to study not only how natural selection works on populations but also what forces may be at work on the mainland populations as well.
What is the most destructive insect in the world?
The most destructive insect is the desert locust, Schistosera gregaria. The locust of the Bible, whose habitat ranges from the dry and semi-arid regions of Africa and the Middle East through Pakistan and northern India. This shorthorn grasshopper can eat its own weight in food a day. And during long migratory flights a large swarm can consume 20,000 tons, 18,144,000 kilograms, of grain and vegetation a day.
Why are bacteria known as pollution fighters?
Through a process known as bioremediation. Bacteria are able to degrade many pollutants found in soil and water. They are also capable of altering a harmful substance so it becomes harmless or even beneficial to its environment. Scientists are working to improve bacteria's efficiency as a natural pollution fighter.
What are the best temperatures for seed germination?
The best temperatures for seed germination in most plants are 77 degrees Fahrenheit to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. Some varieties of seeds are able to germinate at temperatures ranging from 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. However, some seeds, such as those of the Rocky Mountain lodgepole pine tree, Pinus contorta, require extreme heat for germination. The cones of the Rocky Mountain lodgepole pine are covered with the resin that binds the scales of the cone. The high temperatures, 113 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or 45 to 50 degrees Celsius, associated with 202 moderate to severe forest fires are required to melt the resin and release the seeds.